Hey guys, it's Will. It's Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society. Welcome back to the channel. Let's jump right into the video. We are here today to talk about Hell to the Yes, Holy Virgin versus the Evil Dead. This is the 88 Films Blu-ray release, which was released at some point in the summer of this year, 2024. I've kind of given up on trying to track down 88 Films release dates because they move a lot, and I'm never exactly sure when something is coming out. I just know that this showed up in the mail at some point after I pre-ordered it, and now I have it. So I really like this movie. If you watch this channel, like if you saw my announcement video about this release coming out, you'll know that I really like that movie. I believe in 2022, I put that on my list of my favorite first watches of the year. So I did a Patreon exclusive review of that film about 2 years ago. And I had been sent a Laserdisc rip by someone. And that was the first time I saw that movie, and I freaking loved it. I really enjoyed rewatching it on this release. I'm going to try to keep this video relatively short. The videos have been really long recently, and like I rewatched some of them, and when I was like kind of quality checking them, and they're kind of like rambling. And so I've just had to like kind of focus more on one particular aspect of this film that I think has been interesting to kind of look at in the wake of this release having come out. I'll tell you what the movie's about. I'll show off the physical release. I'll tell you what the bonus material is on here, and then I will be out of your hair. This film was originally released in 1991, on June 7th of 1991. It stars Donnie Yen, who you can see right there. That's Ken Lo right there. Pauline Young is also in this film. Ben Lam, Kathy Chow, Sybil Hu. Sybil Hu has like, it's not really a cameo, but she's not like a major part of this movie. She plays like a really angry, aggressive police officer. It's really interesting. She's kind of like, apparently she was in this movie as a favor to the people who made the movie because she was very famous at the time, and her like being in it lent some like validity to the movie and was good for its commercial prospects. It's a Category 3 film, as you can see on the somewhere on the artwork. It does say, yeah, here, Category 3. And that's kind of one of the things I wanted to talk about with this film, because it's not, I think, what a lot of people expected when they saw that it was a Category 3 film, and that the synopsis of this movie is kind of nuts. To give you an idea of what this film is about, Donnie Yen is a college professor, and on the night of a festival, while all these people are like outside eating, drinking, there's like a big parade and stuff like that, a number of his students are murdered, and he is the primary suspect. And so he is working to clear his name because the cops are like following him around and stuff like that and investigating him. And there's like the added complication that his ex-girlfriend is currently dating one of the detectives who's like on the case, right? He's played by Ben Lam. So there's like these personal complications involved in this story. But it's really him. He's trying to not only clear his name, but he's trying to get justice for his students. And it turns out something supernatural is going on. And he's like a history professor, archaeology, something like that. There's an Indiana Jones kind of like heavy Indiana Jones element to this movie, right? As you know, if you're familiar with Hong Kong cinema, in the wake of the success of the Indiana Jones films, there are a lot of films that had elements of Indiana Jones in them, like Armor of God is a very obvious example, The Seventh Curse, Magic Crystal, although I think Magic Crystal honestly reminds me a little bit more of E.T. and of like 1980s James Bond than it does Indiana Jones, but there's still that element of like archaeology, traveling around the world, investigating artifacts that have links to these supernatural things, right? In the same way that the Ark of the Covenant did in Raiders of the Lost Ark and so on and so forth throughout the Indiana Jones series. So there is that element here where they're investigating like this ancient religion in, I believe, Cambodia, and they end up going to Cambodia, and there's like these occult figures, and like there's some supernatural stuff going on and stuff like that. It kind of reminds me of like a John Carpenter type of film as well, in the way that John Carpenter, yes, the French auteur Jean Carpenter, the way that John Carpenter would take a bunch of genres and splice them together, right? So like in the way that, an obvious example is Big Trouble in Little China, but like with a movie like Escape from New York, where you have elements of horror movie, thriller, sci-fi, like grindhouse exploitation types of films and stuff like that, but there's also comedy in those films as well, right? He would take all these things, stitch them together, but make a very unique whole. This movie has elements of kind of like police murder mystery thriller type of film, which you have a lot of from Hong Kong, obviously. It has that Indiana Jonesploitation element to it. It also is part of the subgenre of films from Hong Kong where they investigate supernatural things that are taking place in Southeast Asia, like the black magic films from Shaw Brothers, Boxer's Omen, Hex, Seeding of a Ghost. Like there's all these like black magic, occult, mystery, Seventh Curse. Did I mention that is one of those types of movies, right? And there's a lot of those from Hong Kong. And so it's like the Indiana Jonesploitation, the contemporary cop movie thing is very much an action film too. It is very much like a post-John Woo, I think, type of action film where you do have martial arts in it. And the director here is a veteran of Shaw Brothers and other films of that nature, which I'll talk about in just a second when I go through everyone who was involved in the making of this film. But you do have martial arts fighting. Obviously, you have Donnie Yen, right? So you have martial arts in this film, and you have some cool fight scenes. But you also have like the gun action element. There's a scene where Donnie Yen grabs like a machine gun and is shooting all these people. It's like really exciting, right? So it's kind of all these things stitched together. So I said I was going to mention the director, Tony Liu Chun-Koo. So he directed Holy Flame of the Martial World, which I reviewed recently because I saw it for the first time with the Shaw Classics Volume 4 set that Shout Factory put out, and I really enjoyed that film. He directed Killer Angels, which is a Girls with Guns movie, which I really like. He directed Devil Hunters, which is one of my favorite Girls with Guns. That's like kind of a Girls with Guns movie, and it's kind of a heroic bloodshed, scuzzy exploitation. It kind of like falls between. I know there's a lot of overlap between those genres, right? But I love that movie. It's a really good movie. There's a really great Blu-ray from France, from Spectrum Films of it out, which is how I was able to. I mean, I have like an English dub standard definition. I don't know if it's like a DVD rip of that movie or something like that, but I was able to rip the Blu-ray from France and put the English dub onto it and make like an HD version of it. It was pretty cool. That's a really good movie. He directed Dreaming the Reality, which Moon Lee is in, and he directed Angel Terminators 2. So he did a fair number of the classic Girls with Guns films. I told you who the cast is. This is the other thing I wanted to mention about the crew. Then I will show you the physical release. I will tell you the thing that I have thought to be really interesting in the wake of this film having been released on Blu-ray, because previously I think it was a harder title to find. And then I'll be out of your hair. So Wong Chit was the cinematographer for this film. His first credit in the Hong Kong film industry is from 1951. And his last credit was 1994. He worked in the industry for 43 years, starting in the 50s. He worked on some of the Kwan Tak Heng Wong Fei Hung movies in like the 50s and 60s. This dude is like an OG, right? And he shot, I made a list here. He shot a ton of Chor Yun films. I love Chor Yun. And he shot Clans of Intrigue, The Magic Blade, Killer Clans, Death Duel, which is an incredible movie. I love that movie. Sentimental Swordsman is a great movie. Clan of Amazons, which is a really interesting film. Bat Without Wings, which I freaking love, and I've talked about that film before. Black Lizard, which, as you know, is like one of my favorite Shaw Brothers films. If you watch this channel, you know I absolutely love that movie. And when Shaw Classics Volume 4 was announced to have Black Lizard on it, I was like, I don't care what else is on there. I'm buying it. It has a bunch of awesome movies on it in addition to that. But I was so excited that Black Lizard was on there. He also directed The House of 72 Tenants. This is a film I have never seen. It's from 1972, directed by Chor Yun. It's a Cantonese language comedy, and apparently this was a very important and influential film in the development of Cantonese language comedy and the success of Cantonese comedy. From what I understand, again, I'm not like a historian or whatever, but what I've been told is what shifted the industry from making films predominantly in Mandarin to films predominantly in Cantonese, with the generation of comedians like the Hui brothers and the huge success of like the Aces Go Places films and stuff like that. The House of 72 Tenants was a very early Cantonese language comedy that was a big hit and a hugely influential film in the development of that cinema. And then Buddha's Palm, which I've never seen, but I've heard is a freaking great movie. Shaolin Prince, Demon of the Loot, The Seventh Curse, which I just talked about as being a film that is very similar to this movie. I will say unabashedly and unequivocally, I like this movie more than The Seventh Curse, and I'm a huge Chow Yun-fat fan. Chow Yun-fat is in The Seventh Curse. It's got a lot of amazing cameos from a lot of really successful people in Hong Kong cinema. It's a really fun movie, The Seventh Curse I'm talking about. I prefer this movie, and they're very similar. It's, like something happens in Hong Kong, and then people are investigating a cult and there's supernatural stuff and they go to Southeast Asia, like very similar films. And a lot of people love that movie, and there are probably a lot of people in the world who much prefer that to this, but I really like this movie. So let me show you the physical. It's got this really shiny, as you can see. Let me see if I can get the light just right. Yeah, you see how shiny that is? A very shiny slipcase here. And then you pop that out and you have the artwork again in here. Kung Fu Bob artwork, by the way, which is absolutely freaking amazing, and I love it. And I love that Kung Fu Bob is back doing, of all movies, well, not that he ever went away, but like I love that he did, because like a lot of these labels are diversifying the artists that they use, and they're putting out so many releases that they need to use different people and stuff like that. And I was very excited that Kung Fu Bob got Holy Virgin versus Evil Dead. There's the back cover for you. And then here's the inside. And there's this, the reversible art, if you so desire, is this right here, which is pretty freaking cool. And we have a poster of that artwork, as you can see. And then we flip it, and we have, let me see if I can get the whole thing in there. There you go. That's what she said. That, and then we have a booklet, ta-da, which is matte finish, so it's very nice. So we're not getting a lot of glare on it. You can see that kind of gross out like black magic. But I'll talk about it when I talk about it. I was gonna get ahead of myself and get too excited. So, Moon Monsters, Holy Virgins, and Kung Fu: A Look Back on Donnie Yen's Category 3 Cult Classic by Paul Bramall is the essay here. And hopefully we're not getting... There is some gratuitous nudity in this movie. Did they draw a bra on her for the booklet? I think they did! Yes! Oh my god, that's amazing. If you get this and you get the booklet, look at that picture and tell me if they drew a bra and underwear on her. Oh, that's Sybil Who, by the way, pointing the gun at Donnie Yen's head. So you can see the kind of character who she plays. A kind of out of control. Oh my god, I think they did it in this one too, because there's these naked women running around. And that one! Okay, look. Here, that woman is definitely topless in the movie. And here, look. Amazing. Okay. Anyway, I don't want to... Oh, this scene is really cool, actually. Let me show you one more picture. This is a really cool scene. It's kind of like a sword fight and martial arts scene. So what I want to talk about with this film is, like I said, I did a really extensive Patreon-exclusive review of this movie, and I'm also trying to keep these videos a little bit shorter. What I want to talk about is what I've noticed to be a kind of meh response to this movie on, like, I looked on Letterboxd after I watched the Blu-ray, because I logged it so that I could kind of have I keep track of everything I watch on there. And I saw a lot of, like, middling reviews, like 2.5 stars, 3 stars, 2 stars. And this, I don't really give movies ratings, like in A, B, C, D, stars, 1 to 10, any of that. I find it's largely very arbitrary, because, like, what are you rating it against? Are you rating it against itself? Are you rating it against other movies? Are you rating it against similar films, all films ever made? It's, like, very arbitrary, and I really don't like to give grades or ratings to movies. On Letterboxd, I give 5 stars to movies I love personally, and I give no ratings to anything else, because I feel very strongly that it's really kind of pointless and means nothing, right? But if I were to give a rating to this film, it would be like a 7.5, because it's a really interesting original film, and I find it really entertaining and super fun. And it is an above average kind of like crazy black magic adventure type of film to me. So I was surprised that people were giving it low ratings, but then I started reading people's reviews. And I started seeing other reviews on, Facebook. We have a big Facebook group for this channel. There's like 20,000 people in it. People were posting their reactions in there. And a lot of the reviews seem to be centered around this notion that it's a boring movie, that there's nothing happening, right? And I found that to be really interesting, because one of the reasons I love this movie is I find it really intriguing, because you have this really interesting mystery of this monster appears, kills these people, and then vanishes. And this professor is accused by the police. He has to clear his name, but he also wants to do justice by his students. And he also has this kind of inkling that, like, something isn't right, right? So it's kind of like this procedural type of mystery movie for about the first half. Then this movie has a very solid midpoint. And then the second half of the movie dives deeper into the mystery of what is this monster thing, where did it come from, and how can we defeat it and stop it from doing something like this again, right? And some of the the main characters start getting involved in different ways. People get kidnapped, things like, right? I'm not going to spoil like the particulars of the plot for you, but I really like this film because it has the monster element, and it has like some kind of over-the-top Category 3 stuff with like some gross-out makeup effects and like violence, and it has a lot of gratuitous nudity. I don't think there's any sex scenes in this movie, but there's a lot of gratuitous nudity. Oh no, there's one sex scene, and you kind of catch the end of it. It's like in a car, and these people are having sex, and it's not really part of the plot. It's just kind of like an offhand thing that happens. But it's not a movie that's heavy with sex scenes or exploitative kind of qualities, right? So it's not, when you think Category 3, I think this is not the type of movie you think of. And when you hear crazy like black magic, occult, monster category 3, I think people are expecting like a really gory, brutal movie, and a movie with lots of sex and nudity and a lot of exploitation qualities. And this is really more of like, I think this movie has the soul of like a PG-13 movie. This movie feels very much like an 80s PG-13 like horror crossover film where you have elements of horror, but the primary focus of the film is not horror, it's a mystery. Right. And that, even though I said this really reminds me of John Carpenter, I think that type of film you could really trace to Spielberg. Right. And films like Close Encounters of the Third Kind and E.T., and where he takes these genre films and then he grounds them. Even Temple of Doom, there's like a strong horror influence, right? And Poltergeist, which Spielberg produced. Some people believe he ghost directed. He definitely produced it. You have Duel and Jaws, which are I think kind of more thrillers, but they do have horror elements, especially Jaws, with like the shark being like a monster, the monster movie aspect of that film, right? It's this idea that you take like an outlandish concept, or you take a genre film that is larger than life, that might typically be kind of a trashy, violent, scuzzy, nasty type of film, and you put it in suburbia, and you put it in, obviously Hong Kong is not suburbia, it's a big city. In the Spielberg context, you put it in suburbia, right? So what they're doing with this movie is they're taking this kind of outlandish, occult, black magic, monster, demon summoning type of thing, right? And then they're putting it in 1991 Hong Kong, and they're having characters realistically react to, like, wait a minute, what is going on here? And, like, how do we navigate this? It in a way, is a very similar film to Blue Jean Monster, which I loved, which came out last year from, I think, 88 Films, where you have this kind of element of, like, magic, supernatural, but it's very much like a grounded movie about the lives of everyday people in Hong Kong, right? This is a very Spielbergian thing. The Magic Crystal, the Wong Jing film, which I freaking loved, which also I think, did Vinegar Syndrome put that out last year? Was that last year? I think it was. Very similar, right? It's a very similar type of film. Mr. Vampire 3 is another one, right? So you can see that this Spielbergian thing of taking genre and setting it in the lives of everyday people, such as a college professor, right? And having him react to it and kind of try to navigate this crazy adventure. That's what appealed to me about this film. Whereas I think a lot of people found that boring. And I think also with Mr. Vampire 2, excuse me, where they put it in kind of like regular 1980s Hong Kong, right? People, I found that when the Mr. Vampire set came out of 2, 3, 4, and was it 5 too? I think there were 4 movies in that set. Yeah, 2, 3, 4, 5. A lot of people liked 3 more than 2. And I liked 2 more than 3 because even though 3 is like a really fun, violent, supernatural film with tons of martial arts fighting and lots of spectacle in it, I thought there was something more interesting about the second one because it's less traditional. It's like a vampire, a child vampire, escapes or gets away somehow and is living with these kids in Hong Kong. And the kids are trying to navigate that. The vampire parents are trying to find the vampire child. And I think that is a more interesting spin on the mythology of that world than to just do another period piece film with lots of, fighting and stuff like that. But again, not to knock Mr. Vampire 3 because I thought they were both great movies, but I really like that way of making a film, whatever you want to call it, that narrative style, where you take something outlandish, and Big Trouble in Little China, to go back to Jean Carpenter, is similar, right? It's like everyday, and They Live is a great example from John Carpenter's filmography of like kind of everyday life in LA, and then there's this whole other crazy thing going on, right? And Prince of Darkness, which is one of my favorite John Carpenter movies, is about these scientists who work at this university, and they're going to investigate this strange energy that's happening in this church, and then it gets into this whole metaphysical thing about misinterpretations of the Bible and like the overlap between like advanced science and religion, and like what is a god, what is a devil, like really interesting stuff like that, right? So this movie is really interesting to me, like thematically and in terms of the development of the story, but I do think it's important for people to realize going into it that this is not a hardcore category 3 exploitation horror kind of like scuzzy grindhouse movie. This is much more like a PG-13 style movie that I think they put a lot of nudity and violence in, maybe to try to ride the wave of success of similar films. I'm not exactly sure like what the thinking was. I'm assuming they thought that there would be more commercial potential to a film if they were to load it with those kinds of things. Otherwise, why would you do it? Because you're trying to make money when you make a movie, right? So like when you have lots of gratuitous nudity, someone has made that decision at some point for a reason, right? I don't know what that reason is, but I think that the soul of this movie is not the soul of like an untold story, Ebola syndrome, category 3 type of film. So the bonus material on here is, and there's 2 versions of the film, I should say. There's the uncut category 3 version, which is reconstructed from the best available materials, which is important to point out because it'll sometimes switch into like a much grainier looking footage, and it'll have burned in subtitles on it because that was, I guess, all they were able to find for the uncut version of the film. And then it'll go back to the like pristine, crystal clear kind of HD. It's high definition. It's got, obviously, it's a Blu-ray. It's got 2.0 Cantonese dual mono with newly translated English subtitles. There is The Man Behind the Genius, an interview with Lee Ho Kwan. There is The King of Disco versus the Evil Dead, an interview with Robert Mock. And then it has reversible sleeve art and all the stuff I showed you. So 2 interviews. And then the movie, 2 versions of the film, and all that stuff. So it's Holy Virgin versus the Evil Dead from 88 Films. My name is Will. You are watching Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society. I thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.